Hello there. Click the subscribe button and click the notification bell to unlock tons of future scary uploads. According to Wikipedia, in Navajo culture, a skinwalker, or Yinaldalushi, is a type of harmful witch who has the ability to turn into, possess, or disguise themselves as an animal. This definition sounds about right, as all over America, people are encountering these strange beings. Some of them may be witches, some may be spirits of witches, but all of them are dangerous. None of them are a sight that you want to see when you're out in the wilderness. Enjoy these 10 allegedly real encounters with skinwalkers. Before we begin, remember that you can share your stories at darknessprevails.org. And if you use an Apple device, please click the link in the description and leave an honest review of my podcast on iTunes. We're so close to 300. Thank you. Backpacking Trip and Possible Skinwalker by Cole D. A couple of years back, I went on a camping trip and a summer camp excursion. This excursion happened to be a backpacking trip around the Mount Hood area, the Timberline area to be specific. The first night wasn't so bad, but in the middle of night, I heard some noises that I prayed were just coyotes or deer. But what came after that made little sense to me and to the others I was camping with. You see, one of the people I was bunking with told me that in the middle of the night, I woke up, walked right outside, and made my way into the forest until I finally laid down near a creek bed. Horrified, I explained to them why this scared me. I've never been a sleepwalker, never have, not once in my life. I'm not sure they believed me, but worse was soon to come. The following day, one of the other campers sprained or broke something around his wrist, and we had no first aid or communication with the outside world, so we had to improvise and make a makeshift cast to support his arm until we could get him professional help. So after tending to him, we didn't have much daylight left, so we set up camp by the river where the camper hurt himself. Later that night, I was in and out of sleep, near the campfire that we had going. At one point, when I was dozing off again, I began hearing twigs snapping in the distance and leaves shifting, those sounds drawing closer to where our camp was. Then, when they were right next to the tree line, I heard a voice that sounded close to one of the male counselors we were working with. It spoke in an odd way, as if the person asking the question didn't care at all for an answer. "You all right?" Something told me not to move or get up or answer this voice. Despite not hearing any more movement, when the voice came again, it had closed half the distance between us, now sounding like it was right next to me. "You all right?" I was beginning to shake. I was so scared. I knew the counselor who had this voice, and something deep down told me this was not that person. I did not reply to it, and in moments, I heard what sounded like an animal scuttering away through the underbrush. Then the counselor who I thought it was came walking back into the campsite in the opposite side where that thing had came in. He went to take a bathroom break and had rushed back because he was checking on all the campers, making sure we were all here safe and asleep. When morning came, and believe me, it couldn't come soon enough, we began our final trek to the pickup area to get back to the main camp, which was 2 hours away. As for me, I couldn't feel more on edge. I felt like everyone was looking at me, giving me strange glances. They could probably tell just how scared I was. We finally made it back to the pickup zone, and we had to wait a while for the shuttle to pick us up. I had been holding in a much-needed bathroom break myself, due to fear, but I just could not hold it in anymore. I walked into the nearby woods to relieve myself. I wasn't even that far from the tree line. Out of nowhere, I heard something more disturbing, because the voice I heard this time around was my own voice.
We're here.
It only took me 1 second to start running right out of those woods into the panicked stares of my counselors and campmates. One of the counselors asked what was wrong, but I interrupted them, asking how long the shuttle was going to be before it arrived. Soon it came up. We got in and left that place, and ever since I haven't heard anything like those voices. When we did make it back to the main camp, I talked to one of the other campers about what had happened. He laughed and said, "Must have been a skinwalker." Never again will I go into the forest on a camping trip without something to protect myself, and I won't go anywhere in those woods alone. That was too close for comfort, because at one point that thing was inches from me. The Skinwalker at My Doorstep by Allison. I am 17 years old, and during the time I've been alive, I've never experienced anything as horrifying as this. It happened about a month ago as of writing this. My mom was in India, and my dad was out on a business trip. I was given the responsibility to take care of my little brother. It was around 10 p.m. that night. My brother was in the middle of a gaming session, while I was struggling with writer's block. Just when I had a new, good idea for the romance story I was writing, I heard a knock at the door. My brother and I exchanged looks. We weren't expecting anyone. We wondered who it could be at this hour. We waited a couple of minutes, hoping that whoever it was would give up and go away. But another knock didn't come. Instead, what came was our mother's voice.
"Allie, open the door, it's Mommy."
Our mom? How did she even get here? She had been dropped off at the airport by my dad a few weeks ago. I knew then that something was wrong, no matter how it sounded. If this person really was our mom, she would have entered through the garage entrance like she always did. She knows the garage PIN number. So why she was knocking on our front door, I don't know. "Jason, go upstairs," I told my brother in a low voice. He hesitated as he looked in the direction of the door. "Why? Mom's home," he asked, confused. He began to appear frightened. I knew that wasn't Mom, but I didn't want to scare my 8-year-old brother. Just when I was about to answer him, the knocks we heard before became bangs on the door. They were loud and persistent now.
"Allie, JJ, I know you two are in there,"
the voice said almost tauntingly. My heart sank, knowing that I'll have to be face to face with this person or something sooner or later. "Just go to bed, JJ." I tried to stay unfazed by the continual pounding on the door. Jason hesitated for a moment before making his way upstairs. I sat there in my chair, completely paralyzed in fear.
"Open it, open it, open it."
The thing on the other side of the door howled. Whatever it was no longer trying to disguise itself as my mother. It sent goosebumps up my spine. I suddenly stood up, angry that whatever that was mimicking my mom. I don't like being tricked. Without completely realizing it myself, I marched toward the door and abruptly stopped in my tracks. Whoever was at the door was not human, not even the slightest. This creature had the blackest eyes. It was lanky, with ribs sticking out of its skin. It was so pale and impossibly tall. Just looking at it, it made me want to vomit. I don't know what got into me, but I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Get out of here! I'm not letting you in!" After that, it felt hard to breathe, and I could see its black eyes on me. I shivered in fear as the thing let out an ear-piercing scream before disappearing into the dark. After that incident, I ran upstairs and held Jason close, hoping that it didn't come back, hoping that my real mother would be home very soon. Until she did get back home, I was afraid that that thing had gotten her, that the way its powers worked was that it took my mother and stole her voice. I'm glad I was wrong. A while after that, I found myself searching on Google for what this could possibly be, and one all-too-close match was an entity called the Skinwalker, something that has the ability to disguise its physical appearance and voice as other animals, even other people. I still am not over this incident. I don't think I ever could be. I don't think this is something any sane human can forget about. Skinwalker on Eagle Mountain by Cystal. This happened a few years ago, but thank God it only happened once. My sister went on a walk around 10 at night. Her name is Rosalie. It was a sort of cloudy and cold night. The moon was out and it gave off a little light, but she could still see well. I wasn't with her that night. I was safe at home watching a movie. When she was near the town park, she noticed a silhouette nearby that appeared to be following her. When she passed a streetlight, the person passed by it eventually as well. But when she caught sight of the thing's shadow, she knew it was no person at all, while the silhouette remained the same. The shadow itself was an amalgamation of dozens of different animals, writhing and curling in on itself, as if they were tied or fused together. Her eyes widened. She said she began to question her reality, so she calmly tried to walk away as it came a little closer. She turned around and began to speed walk now, barely able to contain herself. She was so close to her house, but a little too far. Taking a few looks back, she saw that it didn't approach any further, as if the thing had lost interest in her as she sped up. When she arrived home, though, she felt shaken up, nervous, and altogether terrified. My other sister asked her what was wrong, and she explained the whole incident. Even though I was 9 years old at the time, gullible of course, I still believe her story to this day. I remember the look on her face. I remember thinking it looked so real, so visceral. Her expression said to me that what she saw out there was real, and that has scared me more than anything. Pig-Faced Skinwalker by Elijah D. To begin, I'm one of those people who, when startled enough, I might just throw a fist. Anyway, I'm 15 and was at the trailer alone one day. I had just come in from outside because I'd gotten a weird feeling and I didn't want to stay outside much longer that day. I did forget to lock the door behind me though. I was watching some videos online in the living room when I heard this clomping sound. Not like feet or boots or shoes. It sounded more like hooves, like a horse. And strangely enough, I heard them echoing down the hallway. Then they suddenly stopped. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I turned around slowly, expecting to see something straight from my nightmares, but as the hallway entrance came into view, I didn't see anything. Relieved, I just assumed something was wrong with my earbuds. Maybe they had been popping weirdly or something. But just as I thought nothing was wrong, I could see something out of the corner of my left eye. There was something moving around. I was not alone in this trailer anymore. I remember feeling so horrified. It was like something was pulling my soul out of me. When I managed to turn my head around, I saw a blur of movement. I was too petrified to move much more than that, and my eyes were watering. Suddenly, the lights flickered out, and my phone suddenly turned off. Everything went quiet. I forced myself to get up and move. I looked around, but could see nothing through the pitch darkness. I got up and followed the wall with my hands until I managed to make my way over to the window to lift the curtain to get light inside. As I was about to lift it, I felt something breathing on the side of my face. It was the most awful smell, worse than decomposing animal. I gripped the string, then something scared me even more. I heard my name whispered through the darkness. Like I said before, as it was common for me to do, I involuntarily swung my arm out. I made contact with something I didn't expect. Fur, and underneath that, extremely hard and muscular flesh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to crawl out of the window or jump out. I began clawing and yanking at the drawstring and the curtain itself, causing light from outside to leak into the trailer, revealing to me my attacker. The figure almost appeared human for a moment, but then I got a better look at it. The creature was tall, and it was hunched over. Its legs and arms were very skinny and long. Its hands were claws, and they appeared more like an owl's. There were patches of fur and random spots on its body, but its face was like a pig's, but not at all symmetrical like a natural creature. It was uneven, with sharp teeth jutting out all over its mouth. I saw amber glowing eyes staring at me, and I swear, in that moment I saw it smile. The creature knelt down before me in an entirely unnatural way. Its whole body shifted left and right in order to kneel, as if it had to break parts of itself inside just to be able to move into that position. The smile turned into an open mouth, as if it was about to take a large bite out of my face. I brought my arms up, trying to cover myself, accidentally making contact with the creature. With a scream that sounded like ages of torment, the creature then went silent and still. When I opened my eyes, it was gone. I ran for the lights and turned them off since they had been on, and when I flicked them on again, the lights were working. Then I ran into the bathroom and locked myself inside. I peered hesitantly through the bathroom window to see a figure walking into the woods. Before disappearing entirely, it stopped and looked over its pointed, jagged shoulder, and I saw that smile again. Then it crouched down like before, and a mass of oozing, flopping flesh flew off of it, and before I knew it, there was nothing more than a rabbit that quickly disappeared into the forest. I never stayed in the trailer alone again, afraid that the thing would come back. Nor have I gone into the woods alone at all, a topic that once fascinated me to no end. Skinwalkers are nothing more than a thing of my nightmares, and I will do anything to keep as far away from them as I can. The Thing by Donnie. This is one of many eerie things that I've had happen to me over the years. I'm Native American and enjoy things like target practice, fishing, hunting since a young age. This happened when I was 12. My brother and his girlfriend, along with my friend John, all went out camping together out in the desert one weekend. We joked around until about 9 at night, when all of us kind of just got quiet. We were beginning to feel watched, like someone in the distance was watching us very close. I know it's a cliched feeling to talk about, but when everyone you're with suddenly feels the same way, it's something you just can't ignore. And as a Native American, I believe in what my culture has told me, and with so many spirits and monsters in our folklore, it can get you feeling pretty paranoid. To make me feel a bit safer, I grabbed my Ruger 556 from the tent, and my brother and John did the same with their weapons. About an hour later, his girlfriend had to go to the bathroom, so she got up and went about 75 feet from the campsite. Keep in mind, we were in northwestern New Mexico, and there's tons of hills there, mesas and canyons too. She said she saw something she described as, bizarrely, a half-man, half-coyote sitting on top of the hill, just watching her. So me, John, and my brother walked to where she said she saw it, and the creature was still there. Except now it wasn't sitting like she had described it. We were watching something that looked almost like a coyote, standing on two legs, trying to mimic a person. After a while, it got back down on all fours and ran. Curious and perplexed, we followed it to a nearby canyon, where we soon lost sight of it. It was then, not knowing where it was, that we grew terrified. My brother and I knew what it could have been, but John, being of Mexican descent, wasn't sure. As we returned back to camp, all sets of our eyes glancing over our shoulders almost constantly, we explained to John and my brother's girlfriend what we believed it was. Of course, that would be a skinwalker. That night at the campsite, two of us stayed on guard at all times while the others slept. The next morning, bright and early, we packed up and were ready to go. But I wanted to stop by where we saw that thing the first time, just to check something. Unfortunately, somehow that creature didn't leave any footprints, even though mere meters from where I was standing looking at the lack of footprints, I could see all of ours from last night. My Recent Encounter by L816. I'm 17 years old, and it was last month on the 30th, just 8 days after my grandmother passed away. I needed to go out into the woods to get some fresh air, specifically to a spot that I often walk to for some alone time and to smoke a little bit. I soon made it to the spot with my rifle by my left side. I pulled out my pipe, lighter, and my weed. I was about to load the bowl of the pipe when I suddenly heard something that weirded me right out. It was my grandmother's voice, and it was coming from behind me. I turned around quickly, putting my contraband up, thinking it was a game warden trying to catch some poachers, maybe even teasing me by mimicking an old lady's voice. But to my surprise, there she was, just standing there, staring at me, my mouth hung open. Who are you?" I asked. She responded in my grandma's voice. "It's me, your grandma. Don't you recognize me?" I leapt for my rifle and chambered around. I said to it, "My grandma isn't alive anymore." Then she smiled, revealing angular and sharp teeth and a mouth that nearly stretched from end to end up to her scalp. I was sweating, my arms shaking as I aimed the rifle at her. I took a nervous step forward, trying to be as intimidating as possible. The creature that wasn't my grandma took a step back. It happened like this for about a minute. A step forward, a step back, until it began to disappear into the tree line. Before disappearing completely, it said one last thing to me, using a voice that only barely sounded like my grandma anymore.
"I'll see you again, soon."
After it left, I slowly and carefully headed back to my vehicle, trying to maintain my composure so that it didn't sneak up on me in a panic. When I made it back to my truck, I turned and looked at the tree line, and to my horror and disgust, I saw that smile on a face that was beginning to melt away. melting away the bits that looked like Grandma. I closed the door of my truck, and I floored it down the dirt road. I think I encountered a Skinwalker that day, and had I not been armed, I don't think I'd be around to share a story with anyone. Skinwalker on the Dirt Road by Haley Cheyenne 10. I live in a small town in Florida, where there isn't much more to do than riding around on dirt roads. It was around, I want to say, junior year of high school. Me and my old friend A were riding dirt roads one night. We were out late, maybe 1 or 2 a.m., because like I said, there's not much to do around here. We were coming around this corner on the road, and in my headlights, I saw someone standing in the ditch. Without thinking, I immediately put on the brakes and stopped my car. The person began to walk out into the middle of the road. Me and Day are staring at them, perplexed. Why was someone out here so late, just wandering around on some random back roads? Then suddenly, something happened that made the two of us breathe in sharply together. We saw that this person was 7 feet tall, and they were no person, because people don't have legs that look like a goat's. And the way its legs that were goat-like had no fur on them, just pale grayish-white skin, it was disgusting to me. The creature looked like a malnourished abomination. The way its bones protruded through the skin, it appeared as if it hadn't eaten in ages. It was nearing the edge of the road before it stopped to look directly at us, and in that moment, we made eye contact with it. It had the yellowest eyes you've ever seen. We stared it down as it walked into the woods, and when it finally disappeared out of view, I regained my composure, floored the gas pedal, and we raced home. To this very day, I couldn't tell you what the face looked like. The most I remember are those menacing eyes. It wasn't until last year around Halloween, I started watching videos on YouTube, some of the fringe stuff about cryptids and whatnot, and I stumbled upon videos that gave me an idea of what I saw that night. Now, I also have a family member who has Navajo heritage. When we went to visit them, I managed to get her to ask her older family members if what I saw was a Skinwalker. Before she finished my story, the man she was talking to asked about the eyes. He asked if they were yellow, and I remember very well that they were. Haunting of the Skinwalker by KeroroChan. I'll be perfectly honest, this was probably one of the weirdest things to ever happen to me. First of all, let me mention that we got the inspiration to go here because my brother said it was the skulking grounds for a Skinwalker. He said that he encountered one here once and had even fired at it, though he claims bullets don't do anything to it. Now I live in a decent-sized town in Ohio. About 20 or 25 minutes away from our house is a stretch of road that's surrounded by woods. There's a few farms around there, but it's really just used for public hunting as it floods horribly sometimes, and the city closes those roads with large metal gates. Alongside this road is a small cemetery called Henline Cemetery. It's a tiny family plot, with the last grave being from the 1850s. The city still does maintain it, and all of the old headstones are gone now. So they, the city, put in one large headstone with all the graves listed there. It was down the path a little ways from this cemetery that my brother first encountered that creature. Anyway, my girlfriend and I were out there hanging around with our friend Jeremy. We had decided to check out this cemetery and walk around for a little bit, seeing if we could creep ourselves out. Michaela, my girlfriend, is a big paranormal fanatic. She loves paranormal stories and the like, and she wants to see this thing my brother saw But I'm not going to lie, I wanted to see it too, and so did Jeremy. We get to the tiny cemetery, pull off, and start to walk around. I've got anxiety, and it tends to show up at annoying and often random times. And at that moment, I felt like I was being watched. I tried to swallow it down. Again, I knew I had anxiety problems, and maybe I was a bit excited at the time. Now, the path the hunters use here is pretty narrow, so we had to go in a single file line. With me in front, Jeremy in the middle, and Michaela in the back. The walk was pretty uneventful. All we saw was really fresh coyote poop. No big deal. As for coyotes, they usually don't bother you. But it was getting dark, and the path itself was full of holes, roots, and downed limbs. So we decided to just turn it around and go get some supper. After eating, Jeremy decided to go back to Henline. The pull-off is never closed, because the region is for public hunting. So we pull in and Jeremy gets out. Michaela and I stayed put though. The feeling of that place had completely changed from during the day. It was paralyzing, nauseating even, and I could barely breathe. It was just a feeling of pure evil. Suddenly, we saw Jeremy racing back to the car and jumping inside in a panic. We asked him what was wrong, and he said he felt something pull him into the cemetery. He fought himself away from its grasp and ran back to the car. He didn't have to say much more than that, and I was pulling out and speeding out of there as fast as I could. We're going back eventually, but not at night. Never at night. And we're definitely going to bring some sort of protection with us. I still want to see this thing. I just wonder if it was the creature my brother saw who attacked Jeremy. And I wonder if it grows stronger at night. I wasn't scared, but I am now. By Bearbeard822. I work nights as an Asda colleague. Asda is a member of the Walmart family here in the UK. Just a little background about myself before I get to the main events of that night. I'm 24 years old, living in Manchester in the UK. The job I work requires me to pull heavy pallets of beer, wine, and spirits from the warehouse to the shop floor and stock the shelves. It's certainly not the most glamorous job in the world, but at the very least, it pays the bills. In this job, I'm contracted to work Friday to Sunday. I should also mention I'm going to be joining the RAF soon, and will be using this job to get by while I train so I can pass fitness tests. Anyway, it was time to work my Friday night shift. I was on my way to work, traveling through the old reservoirs not too far from where I live. As I'm riding through this rocky dirt road that cuts through the densely wooded area between the middle of the bodies of water leading to the hill, I'm bracing my already aching legs when I begin to get the feeling that I'm not alone out here, like someone is watching and you have no idea what their intentions really are. I've never been a run like a coward type of guy, so by the time I get through to the other side, I'm really wanting to know why I feel this way and who might be watching me. So I stop at the bottom of the hill, partially to give my poor legs a rest and to see what is watching me. Of course, the entire time I'm still feeling that familiar gaze, the gaze of the unknown, taking in my body at different angles. I park my bike. I walk over to an area where excess water runs off into the other reservoir. As I'm standing there, the sun setting and glistening vibrant red and orange against the water, blinding me for a few seconds while my eyes scan the horizon and opposing tree line. I don't see anything. I must have stood there for maybe 10 minutes, all the while still feeling that feeling. Assuming after this point I'm going crazy and just feeling paranoid for no particular reason, I get back on my bike, and I proceed to agonize my legs and lungs with a 10-minute ride up what felt like a 45-degree angle, until I hit the flat ground at the top, where the road meets a park path to the left. I stop at a nearby bench for another breather. That park is mostly grass. Long and winding paths dot the area. It's a big cut-through to multiple places, hence why I'm using it to get to work. It's 8:30 at that point, and I've got another 45-minute ride ahead of me to get to work. So I've got some time to sit there, reply to a couple of texts, and wait. Then comes that feeling again. It just falls over me like a veil. Behind me, about 50 feet up to the tree line, that's where I feel it coming from. I lit a cigarette and listened for a moment. I wanted to hear something, a noise, anything, because at this point it was making me mad. Whoever or whatever there was out there following me or watching me, they would know they were following the wrong guy. I took that final burning drag that stung my throat, and I was finished with my cigarette. I flicked it away, and I stood up, turning my face to that tree line. I still didn't see anyone, but I could feel someone's eyes boring into the back of my head the moment I turned around. Either to soothe my paranoia or put a stop to this bullcrap, I began to walk over to those trees where I sensed it. I'm about 30 feet away from it, and I could still only see darkness. It's already dark out now, with just the ambient light from the setting sky's twilight, only dimly lighting the darkening park. I continued walking, staring into a bush, when I suddenly got a feeling that I should not be doing this, a feeling of regret that was growing with every step. Hairs on my neck were standing up, same for the hair on my arms and my head. I shook it off. As hard as it was to ignore, I quickened my pace. It was so fast, it happened in the blink of an eye, but at the same time it felt like an hour passed by. About 10 feet from the bush, my ears began to feel pressured, like they do when you're climbing a great altitude. But I was in a park in the middle of Manchester. Then, I watched the bush twitch for a moment. Fear kicked in, and I felt paralyzed. Something inside the bush chirped, then growled, and whatever it was black as night as it came out of the undergrowth. It had something in its dog-like maw. It was 4.5 feet tall, on all fours. Its eyes. Ugh, my goosebumps act up writing this now. I feel like the hairs on my skin want to burst just thinking about it. Its eyes were red, and I don't mean bloodshot. I don't mean glowing from the light of the sky either. I mean they were red, with pinprick small pupils. Its arms were long and veiny, and its legs were massive and powerful from what I saw next. Its head darted up at me. Fight or flight kicked in, and I reached out to punch it right in the snout, but that didn't even seem to faze it. The creature stared and growled as I went to land a kick, and I screamed at the top of my lungs at it. It stood after a good belt to the face from a size 10 boot, and I kid you not, the creature was a foot taller than I was, and I was a little bit over 6 feet. The creature then dropped a gray cat from its mouth as it howled a gross gurgle that I can only assume was a mixture of pain from me hitting it, saliva, and fluids from the poor cat. It darted away from me. I don't freaking know why. It ran in the direction I came from. I felt woozy. I went for my bike. I sat on it for a moment, shaking and staring. It took me a moment to realize that creature had human hands. Needless to say, I wasn't going to be traveling that way for a while, because I don't want that thing to finish what it started. And after that, I rode home, calling in sick for the weekend. If anyone else in the Manchester area has seen something like this, or felt something strange in the woods, let me know, because saying that I saw a Skinwalker here in the UK sounds crazy. I Didn't Believe in Monsters by James David Dyer. I never really believed in monsters. but I always enjoyed reading about them. Even a couple of days before my camping trip, I was watching videos on 411 missing people. I guess the unknown and undiscovered really piques my curiosity. This particular experience happened back in 2015, when my two friends, Tony and Ryan, planned a spur-of-the-moment camping trip with me. We planned for the following weekend as we each had no plans of our own, so it sounded like a fun idea. We headed out late on a Friday evening to a spot a few hours from my house through the canyon and into the mountains. This area of northern Colorado is known for its bears and mountain lions, but we weren't worried. We were 3 big guys and 2 of us were bringing heavy firepower to deter any unwanted guests. We checked out a few locations when we neared the area we wanted to camp. A few spots were a bust with a lot of people out for the weekend. Luckily, though, we found a spot more secluded and set up camp. It was supposed to be nice and sunny out that weekend, and I had planned on jumping in the nearby lake. Rain clouds began to form in the distance, and the weather became cold as night neared. We sat around the campfire, telling jokes, a few ghost stories, really having a blast, despite the weather. As it approached midnight, we called it good and put the fire out. Tony went to his 2-man tent, and I went to the 10-man tent that Ryan had set up. As I crawled into my sleeping bag, I passed out within minutes of my head hitting the pillow. It must have been 3 a.m. when I woke up with the urge to go to the bathroom. I crawled out of my sleeping bag. I found it hard to walk. I was stumbling around like a drunk, not being able to find my balance. I kind of found my composure for a moment and exited the tent. Once I began to move around in the pitch black, my vision began to sharpen a bit. Only it wasn't pitch black. It was more like gray, and my vision had become distorted like a bad television picture. With the strangest sensation, I stumbled forward, managing to alleviate myself against a nearby tree. I headed back to the tent when I was done, with an intense, eerie vibe taking hold of me. I awoke the next morning, not really giving what had happened the previous night much thought. That was until Tony mentioned something around the breakfast campfire. He said the sensation of his balance had been taken from him when he exited his tent a few hours after heading to bed. He said it was the strangest feeling he had ever had. He hadn't drank any alcohol that night. I told him my story, concurring with him, but we both thought nothing of it. Probably just something we ate or just a one-off thing. Then we quickly focused on the day of fishing ahead. After spending the day at the nearby lake, we retired to our camp with our catch and prepared a nice fish fry. We sat around the campfire until close to midnight, then headed off to bed. After a few hours of sleep, I awoke with a sick feeling in my stomach. I was in disbelief that I felt like I wanted to throw up. It made no sense. Why did I feel like this again? I decided to turn over and try to go back to sleep, trying to fight it. But the feeling pestered me until I had to jump up and run out of the tent. Only I couldn't run. I stumbled around again in a peculiar fashion while trying to reach for the zipper on the tent. I fumbled with it, managing to get it open at last, and practically fell out of the tent. I staggered into the dark. I must have only gone 15 feet from it, finding a spot for me to spill my guts on the floor where nobody would see it in the morning. I was growing ever more aware of my surroundings as I kneeled in the dark. In between heaves, I managed to peer around into the darkness, feeling how vulnerable I was all of a sudden. Just then, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned in its direction, thinking I should keep an eye on it in case whatever it was came at me. Coming through the dark was the shape of a man, but I heard no snapping of twigs or branches, and the crunch of the forest floor below was absent. "Hey, James, are you okay?" A whisper called out. My pounding heart finally relaxed a bit at hearing Ryan's voice coming towards me. Thinking that he heard me throwing up and came to check on me, I answered that I'd be fine, and I wasn't sure what had come over me. He crept closer until I noticed he had stopped probably 5 feet from me, and he whispered again, "Why don't you come over here?" I looked up again, after heaving once more, thinking to myself, what does he want? Can't he see I'm sick? Irritated, I shouted at him, "What?" To which he responded, "Why don't you come over here?" Feeling disoriented, with my head pounding, I slowly got to my feet and began to head in his direction. That's when I realized I was heading away from the tent. I stopped and turned around, trying to find the outline of the tent in the dark. I then asked Ryan what was so important that he needed me over there, to which he responded again, "Why don't you come over here?" This better be good, I thought, as I begrudgingly began to head in his direction. I heard another voice call out, "Hey Zach, where are you going?" It was Ryan, except now his voice was coming from behind me, back in the direction which I realized was the tent. Confused, I turned towards the tent, and then back to where I'd just seen Ryan standing. The outline of a man in the dark was gone now. Just trees and forest floors surrounded me. I picked myself up and ran in the direction of the tent, finding that my equilibrium had returned to me. The real Ryan asked me again where I'd been going. I didn't want to sound crazy, so I just said I got turned around in the dark for a second. He went back to sleep then, and I laid there, listening in the night, watching for shadows cast upon the thin nylon. I didn't see anything or hear anything else that night. I'm not sure what I encountered in the woods. I don't know if it was a hallucination from being half asleep and half awake, or a skinwalker trying to lure me off deeper into the woods. But what I do know is that if you're camping in the Rockies of northern Colorado, beware of your surroundings and beware of where your friends are. Skinwalkers, one of the scariest boogeymen ever created. While it sounds like a story you tell your kids so they don't wander around in the woods or talk to strangers, the fact that so many people claim to sight something in the woods resembling a skinwalker, it really gives me pause and a slight fear of forests. But hey, I might be a skinwalker myself. Who knows what lies underneath? Is this skin me? Or is it my disguise? Good night. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, no matter where you're listening from. If you want to support my channel and make this show possible, consider donating any amount on our Patreon. In return, for as long as you donate, you'll get access to ad-free MP3 downloads, and you'll get your name in the credits at the end of our videos. You can also click the shop button below if you're watching this video, or go to teespring.com/stores/darknessprevails to check out my creepy cool merchandise. As usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous video, about 15 true ghost stories. Thomas Moore says, "Finally, I've burned through pretty much all of your videos. I woke up today craving a new one. Now I'll get to listen to it when I get off work tonight. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I can't help but say that your last name on your username really matches what you commented about. More. But I can't blame you. I'm always waiting for more of my favorite shows." Sosura Z says, "What a way to start the day. Monday morning in Australia." Thank you, sir. You're quite welcome. I think Monday mornings are the best time for scary stories, for some of us anyway. Anything to help the workday go by. Skinner Junkie Forever says, "Haven't watched this yet, but I'm super pumped for these stories. Best thing to listen to while doing my makeup. Makes my eyeshadow extra spooky." Makes me want to do an episode where my wife does my makeup. She's been wanting to for a while, and I'm starting to run out of sticks to defend myself with. Anthony Craig 2009 says, "Darkness, you're amazing. Just what I need to help me with this never-ending night shift. While I do prefer working at night, there's something about the night shift that just drags on so long. But if you work with people, then you usually deal with less people at night. But hey, that's been my experience. Video Bros says, "We hope you had a great Halloween. I dressed up as Mega Man, one of my favorite video game characters of all time, and one of my favorite game series. If you dressed up, what did you dress up as? I dressed up as a fat man narrating stories and covered in glazed donut icing. Oh, look at that, I put the costume on again." Anyways, guys, thanks so much for tuning in to another Darkness Prevails episode. More scary stories are coming soon, so stay tuned. Until next time, here are the credits to my patrons who continue to support me. Remember, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a stream.